Python to SQL. It might be a little rusty, and working with like our large code base might be too. Um, but like I don't know. That's kind of like being an engineer. So, my point of saying that is like you kind of need when you forget how to do things, and like you get this problem like for an interview or just like whatever just for work that like you forget you haven't done it in a little while, you feel rusty. It's like, well, how do you approach it? Like that's more like what you should try to lean on is how do you approach this stuff. So let me stop sharing for 1 second. I want to remove this. Okay. Okay, so the first thing I would do, let's run the tests. You can already kind of see my approach. So we have this filter by method. We'll run the tests. All right, so we'll just do ls pytest tests. And then you can start to see, right, this test ORM. It's probably what we want to run to start. Okay, and now we just start from the top. And so we have this filter by. Here we have this none type object is not subscriptable. Why is that? Right, we're selecting the return value of filter by, so filter by must be returning none. So we're kind of good. So we're going to need to fill this in. So you can see like this passes through a test cursor, it passes through the venue class, it passes through this. And what's supposed to occur, let's see if we can figure this out, is that it returns the venue that like matches. Okay? Where we're passing through this. So now, basically the hard part is constructing the query, So what we need to do, what I would do at least, is maybe I would write out in a comment, what that query is, and that way I can work my way up to it, okay? So select all from venues where, and this is going to be where the name equals Los Tacos Al Pastor and price is 1. So where name equals, Los Tacos Al Pastor and price equals 1 semicolon. Okay. And that's pretty good. We actually can do, this part is a little tricky. I'm not sure if we could produce this. It'd be a little hard. What makes this problem a little easier is the fact that if you remember, eventually this will be like a query. Like this is what we want to produce, this kind of query. And then what we can do is really, when we get the cursor, is cursor.execute, right? And then we'll pass through the query as the first argument, and then the values, right, that we want each of these to be as the second argument. So this really is going to be like a %s, and then this would be a %s. Does that make sense? And then we'll pass through the values here, right? Los Tacos Al Pastor, and then 1. Do you remember this? Right, and then we'll probably do like cursor fetch all is the records, and then we'll do something like build from record that class, or build from records that class with a list of records, something like that. So we have build from record right here. Okay, so now like if you kind of start here, then the problem I think becomes a little easier. Right, this part's easy. Like we break this then into steps. So this we'll call like, I don't know, my query prefix or something. Is this part, and then this is the where clause. And then the full query equals f string of the query prefix space the where clause. Okay, and then now it's like and these are some. And now it's a matter of kind of hitting a breakpoint and seeing how to get this to work, because we want to start generating this stuff. All right, let's put a breakpoint in. Right, because I want to produce this, and I want to produce this, and then I combine it, and then get these. I want to produce this somehow, right? So it's like 3 different things that we want to produce dynamically. So we'll put in the breakpoint, and we'll just start coding this out. So I'll run PyTest, and now kind of what's up. So we'll just see what we have. So cursor is going to be this like test cursor thing. Class is the venue class. The attributes, that's kind of the key thing, right? Is that. So now how do we produce, well, we just kind of always have to just toggle back. How do we produce this string from this, you know? Well, attributes.keys probably, right? And that's getting a little closer. And then we just loop through these, you know, 4K in keys, return the key. I know it always, oh, that actually worked. So we'll call this my keys. But I want to do the key of name equals percentage. So we'll do this. We'll do an F string of the key equals percentage, S. I think that's right. And now already we're on our way. Right? And I just always check going back here. Name equals percentage S and price equals percentage S. So now how do I get from this part to, you know, this is what I have now. How do I get that to have name equals percentage S and price equals percentage S? Well, we can join this thing on the word and, right? Name equals percentage S. Yeah, so now this can be my where clause. Basically, I just need the word where. So the where clause now is going to be this attributes.keys, and this is going to produce for me the name equals percentage S and whatever that will price equals percentage S. Right, that's what this is producing. And so now I can have like where, I can put the word where here. And then obviously the query prefix, that's not so bad, I don't think, because it's just the class, I like the class dot, is there a table? Yeah, dot dunder table. So for that part, it's just select all from query prefix. It's just select all from class.dunder table, right? And then we need this part. Where does this come from? Like my attributes, right? Okay. And how do I get that? Dot values. So here's like, you know, so, and maybe I need to, you know, turn this into a tuple, I'm not sure, or we can do something like that. All right, and then pass this through. Here, and then do cursor.fetch all, and then return this, right? Return build from records. And let's just see if that helps. So we did pass one, right? It obviously doesn't. This is, I think, where they don't pass through any values, you know. So we'd have to remove that part, you know, or maybe we'd have this part of the where clause as possible, you know. But we can go from there. But the main point is like, you know, the trick of this is not remembering, oh, right, dot keys and dot join, like all that stuff you can get to. The trick is, okay, I'm gonna like give my, you know, all tests are all about like, I give myself an example, you know, here's my inputs, what's the output? In this case, the output that we want to like work with is the select statement, right? Select all from venues, where name. So just literally write it out for yourself, you know, make it easier on your brain. And then, you know, put in the breakpoint. Just doing this, like these are the key steps, not anything else. You know, put a breakpoint in at the very top, run the test, Think about the output that we need to produce. Break it down. Like I'm not saying that because I think it's clever or something, right? Like breaking it down really helps. So it's like, okay, start with this part, get it done, knock it out, go to the next one. Now just, interact with it and build it up to it bit by bit. Right? And then now we move to the last part. This one. Okay? For the one paginate by, I'll give you a hint, like there is an offset. You can look up what offset is in SQL. Okay? So that's something you can look at. Once you see, but I would do the same exact thing. Like, write the SQL query. What is the SQL query? Select all from whatever it is, where, or maybe it's I think it's some sort of offset, and then limit, right? But first, literally just write out the SQL query. Then put it in the breakpoint. Then, work with it until you produce the SQL query, and then run the test. Okay? If you do that, like the reason for doing something like this is because, everyone runs into hard problems. It does not matter what level you're at. And the key thing is when you run into the hard problems, to have a strategy to break this stuff down. Okay? That's the whole point. Okay? So, yeah, that's why I also wanted to not just do a lab review, but do this kind of in the middle so that now you can go back. If you go back and you're like, oh, cool, I forgot attributes.keys. That's missing the point. I want you to please go back and do this part, right? Write out the query, put a breakpoint in, build up to it. Okay? Even if you know the answer, just build up to it, just to reinforce the practice, right? What to do when you're stuck, type of thing. All right. Questions? I don't know. Anything else to go through? So I'll give you some more time on this. I'll give you another 20 minutes or so. Take your time. You don't have to, if you don't finish it all, that's not a big deal. I would say it's more about like I said, just go get unstuck. Have a strategy for getting unstuck. That's all I care about. All right. Cool. And then if you finish early, I did deploy the Intro to SQL Alchemy, so you can look at that and play around with that. Is something that you all can handle pretty well. I figured I'd just go through it, and this way you can get a sense of how these different pieces fit together. So the first thing you can see, we're just importing the SQL Alchemy library, right, from Flask SQL Alchemy. That just allows this to play a little bit nicely, a little bit more simpatico with Flask. I think this
recording in progress.
How did that happen? Oh well. I think that version of the library is also just a little easier to work with. Okay, so the first thing is this is creating an instance of SQL Alchemy, right? And that's coming from here, and we call that the DB. And then the next thing, you can see that what I'm doing is this is the create app function. That's going to both create a Flask application, set up some configuration. So create a Flask app, set some config, and then basically connect SQL Alchemy. Okay. So for the Flask part, right, this is the Flask app, and that's just dunder name, right? And that will create my app. So now we have our Flask app. Then the next thing is to set some configuration on it. There's nothing there's not really a keyword. I think actually you should, no, I take that back. This string does have to match. Okay, so in this case, you do need to set on the config SQL Alchemy database URI. Right, and normally these values don't really matter, but in this case it will. So this is SQL Alchemy database URI. In that we can put in our database URL, and I'll just declare that here, database URL. In this case, the string is PostgreSQL : localhost, because this is from my laptop as opposed to RDS. Right, if it was RDS, I would put in the URI there. the port number 5432, and the database name is CRM. So this is like your connection string. Okay, what's this? And we set that here, and then the last thing is it's db.init app. Okay, so when I do this, so this is DB, right? That's the SQL Alchemy library. I do init app, and then that will take this app, look for app dot, this value, config SQL Alchemy database URI, and pass that through to SQL Alchemy. All right, and then finally, I should probably return the application itself. All right, so once we do that, once this part runs, then SQL Alchemy will know about, about my database because it's getting set right here. So you're going to need this part to run. The other thing is, this user. So we want to connect this user class to the database, and specifically like to the users table in the database. So, I've already set this up, I believe, but you can see I just have a create table users. There must be a, PSQL-D CRM, I'm guessing. So I already have that database CRM, and there's the users table. And if you want to see it, here's, ID, username, email, integer, character. So then we exit out of here, and basically want this to line up, right? So the first thing is we want this user class to get the capability, get some built-in capabilities from SQL Alchemy. So to do that, that's where we use a degree of inheritance. So just do db.model. This, like I said, it does just a couple things. Like for instance, we can probably now declare and do name, be able to do mass assignment, right? Where we do name equals this thing. Whereas before we had to write some code to be able to pass through these key value pairs automatically. Now I believe SQL Alchemy will just allow us to do that. Okay, the other thing we have to do is the table name equals users. So the same thing, why do we need to do this? So this way it knows the table name, so that when it generates a SQL, it knows to do select all from the users, right? So you can see just pretty standard stuff. And then we set the attributes, all right? So for this, all these are going to be DB columns. And what is DB, right? DB comes from this app init file, right? And the app init, not there, the app init file. The app init file is what runs, right, is what will have this DB right here. Okay, the SQL Alchemy DB, and that DB is associated with my database. All right, so we'll do db.column. I'll just keep that there for now. And then we'll do the same thing for username. Let me see, is that what we call this thing? Yeah, username. Username equals, and that'll be db.column again. And then we'll do another one for email. That's db.column. Okay, so think about what we're doing. In the DB module, there's a class called column, and now we're creating an instance of a column and assigning it to be username, ID, email. And then in this, you specify, right, you're always kind of specifying these classes or types, another attribute from this SQL Alchemy, this DB module, which is db.integer. So it's an ID column, it's of type integer, and then we can say primary key equals true. All right, and the username, this is probably db.string. I did this 80 characters. I don't even know if you need to do this. And then you can set some configuration unique equals true, nullable equals false. What is this for? Well, the unique equals true is probably pretty self-explanatory, right? It will throw an error if a value occurs more than once. Nullable equals false, right? Also pretty obvious. If it's null, it'll throw an error, right? It's probably, we want the same thing for the email, db.string, same thing. You can do 120 characters if you want. Unique equals true. Nullable equals false. Okay. So now you have this user class. It's pretty good. The only last thing is we get this, because we're using Flask SQL Alchemy, we get this thing like Flask Shell. And I think this will work if I did everything okay. So that does work. The way this, in order to make this work, to get this set up, I have this .flaskenv file. So when I call like Flask Shell, it will look for what's set in here. And you can see here I'm saying, hey, the Flask app is in server.py. And then server.py, you can see runs my create app, right? And create app. So create app sets up this, right? Connects to the database. And then we have this @app.shell context processor. That's for creating the shell. And basically whatever you define here, DB points to the DB class, user points to the user class, that comes from here, right? Whatever you define here, you're going to have access to in your shell. So I have access to DB, which is, has the MySQL Alchemy connection, has some other things too. I also have access to user. Let's see, can I do something like user email, bob@gmail.com, right? So you can see that, like, here's my user. I just created a user. And then, right, and you can see it did set this. If we try to do something else, I'm guessing this would throw an error. Let's see. See that? So, like, why did that occur, right? Because we set these attributes here. We said ID, username, email. Okay? And then, in order to, so if we set this user, and then I think it's like db.session.add, say we want to save the user, db.session.add user, and then it's db, I forget if it's just db.commit, and maybe it's db.session.commit. Ooh, interesting. Okay. Following row, we have a null. We got a null error. Oh, there we go. Look at that, beautiful. So we can see that, it looks like a mess, but then finally we look at this. Null value in column username of relation users violates the not null constraint. So it breaks. So what I should have done was do user, and I can do username is Bob, and that's good. And now db.session.add user, db.session.commit. It could be, I did db.session.commit, sorry. And it's still getting, it still thinks it's null. It could be, it's probably because I'm adding, what I did was I added one session to the user, I would add one user, and then I created a new user. So I added actually technically two users, one of which is okay and one of which is not. And then I did db.session.commit. And so I think it's good with one of them and it's breaking on the other one. So what I probably should do is just exit out of this for now. I'm sure there's another way. And then create the user. This user looks pretty good, I think, right? Has the email. And then we'll do db.session.add that user and db.session.commit. That worked. Okay? So now if you want, right, like you can go to psql-dcrm and, so we have this table user, select all from users, right? There's Bob. This is my Bob, right, that I just added there. Okay, so you can see like kind of the process here. So we did Flask shell, we initialized a new user, right? We did db.session.add that user, and then we did db.session.commit, which is effectively our save method from before. Okay. Conwell asks, regardless of how many times we import db from app, will it point to the same SQL Alchemy instance for every import of db? So let's take a look. So basically this is going, if you think about it, when we do Flask shell, when we do this Flask shell, it's going to run this file essentially, and then do create app, and create app will then, it's going to be running this and connecting DB, right? If you exit out of this and then rerun it, it will run this whole process again. If you do Flask run, right, we can also do like Flask. I don't think we have a actual thing, but it's doing the same thing now. It's calling it because this Flask env sets the Flask app as server.py. It will run this app create app and then app.run effectively, right, to boot that up. So every time you do one of those commands, it's going to rerun this app init file and reinitialize this SQL Alchemy instance.
Hey Jeff, I have a different doubt too, a bit different doubt. Could you go back to server.py again? So in the line number 1, from app import create app db. So my understanding is the moment we see an import from a file, the file is executed, which will be app.py in this case. And now if you go to app.py, I mean the init for app.py.
Sure.
Yeah. So in the line 6, the DB is equal to SQL Alchemy. The object is already created for SQL Alchemy. The create app hasn't been called yet. Its definition is there, it hasn't been called yet. My question is, now if you go back to server.py.
Yeah.
So this DB which we imported, this hasn't been linked yet. I mean, if the execution of line, assuming the line 4 hasn't executed yet, the DB is not linked to the database we have. From the line 1.
Only, here it's import, you're just initializing it, and then here it's linked, right there.
Yes. So that's what my question is though. How come the DB which we got in the line 1 is the same DB which will be linked in creator?
This is just a pointer to the same object, Like they both, this DB is this DB, like this is the same instance here. So it's just referencing the same instance from here. This guy's initialized here. When we call create app, right, it's referencing this variable and calling db init app in there. Yeah, we're never kind of initializing two SQL Alchemies, I don't think. Yeah, this is the same one. It's a good detailed question, but I don't see I don't think this results in a bug. Cool. Other things that you can do. So right, once you call Flask shell, right? So Flask shell, right? We get this from this Flask SQL Alchemy library. We can do Flask shell. You can do db dot. Is it db.query or db.session? I think it's db.session.query user. Okay, and then you can start to write your own kind of method, right? So notice that this doesn't actually execute the SQL. You need to and that's actually a nice thing. It only executes it at the last possible moment. So here we'll do .all, and now that returns to me a list of user instances. Okay. By the way, why does it print out like this? We can change that if you want with this repr type thing. And this is not a SQL Alchemy thing. This is just like any Python. If you want to change the way that you see the object, you can do return. We'll do this, some quote, user. And then we can do, I don't even know if we need this bash r. Okay, well, we'll just do it this way. We'll do self.username. This is a nice thing, right? You can now when this thing's actually displayed, you'll see the username, if that's more helpful for you, and you can do more, that you can add more attributes here if you want, just to show you. You see that? Right, it's kind of nice. And there's our Bob. Okay, and then same thing, right? You can do dot first to get back the first one. You can do get to get by an ID, right? Get ID 2. That's Jane Smith. We can do our filter by as well. All right, but I'll let you all like kind of look at this stuff. But in terms of just, it isn't, I do like the question that Conwell asked because it's like shows really trying to understand how these things connect. So, that's kind of what the reading's about is like, okay, we initialize SQL Alchemy, right? We define this create app. Here's where the database connection is set. We directly set it on app, and then we, connect it to SQL Alchemy in this line, right? Then from there in user, this user takes in, here's DB. Once it's kind of inheriting DB, that's telling it about the SQL Alchemy connection. Here we're setting some attributes, obviously. This shows our display. What's next? The server.py calls create app. This is what sets the connection to the database. And then, this make shell context. This is basically importing the DB object and the user class. Okay? And then from there, you could see, there's a separate reading on this, but you can see just some kind of query methods. But also you can Google, there's more than just the ones I show. So if you just Google, SQL Alchemy, query methods, here's the query API, right? So, it's just a library. But so you can just start to do that and get some questions. First, filter by, right? So that you can see why we did this thing. Here's filter by name equals some attribute, right? And what will this do? This does your where clause, obviously, right? Okay. Other questions about this? It's just something like, it's a good way to review. It's also just good to know because, when you submit, any take-home assignments or, work for your internship, this is the library that you should move towards. Cool. So I will